Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Restoring Hope with Crosswinds Counseling. I'm your host, Curtis Smith. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And as always, a huge thanks to our community partners who make it possible for us to be here each and every week. Tesco, Shepherd Community Center, and Prime 47 downtown. The support of these wonderful and generous companies makes it possible for us to be with you every Thursday night at 9:30 right here on WHMB TV 40. As always, we have a great show for you tonight. Our first guest spends his life on the front lines of shaping the future, middle school. Tom Hughes is the principal of Maple Crest Middle School in Kokomo. Tom, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It feels like middle school is the front line. Like, you've got to be called into that work. Being a middle school principal, I think I could break out in hives thinking about that. What is it that you love about doing it?
I talk to parents all the time, and middle school is the time that I talk to parents and they're about ready to pull their hair out. And the best word I can use to describe middle school and middle school students is messy. They are coming in as kids and they are leaving us as young adults. And that process that they go through, the 3 years that they spend with us in middle school, isn't always a linear path. They are sometimes having the best day of their life, and an hour later it's the worst day of their life, and everything in between, and helping them grow in their tools that they need to survive in a world that isn't necessarily kind all the time, that isn't always what they would want it to be, and build them up so that they can make the future of that world what they want it to be. And so that's what we work on every day.
So you're talking 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
We have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
And you said something very interesting there. They come to you as kids, they leave as young adults. That might not have been the case 20, 30, 40 years ago for middle school, but because of the internet, because of cell phones, because of the speed of the world, it feels like, yeah, when you leave 8th grade, you really are kind of a young adult. The world is sped up. Kids are getting older, younger, if that makes sense. And that's 100%. From an outsider's perspective, that's how I feel. Is that what you see?
Absolutely. They are exposed to more earlier on.
Yeah.
And that is everything from social media and what they're exposed to on the internet, what their parents don't even know they have installed on their phones. I talk to parents all the time, and they talk about, I check my kid's phone. There's so much that the kids are able to access that I don't think parents fully grasp. And it's experiencing those situations before they are mature enough to handle those situations.
That's a scary thing to hear, because as parents, we think that we're keeping up, but maybe we're not.
And that's, as a school, that's part of our goal, is helping students understand digital citizenship, and what they put on the internet is with them forever. And the things that they do and they say, even using apps that may or may not provide some sort of anonymity to those students, can still be traced back to them and remain out there forever. And so that's a lot of what we continue to build into those kids, and helping them become members of the 21st century in a digital world and help navigate those things.
You've been at Maple Crest for 7 years. Let's talk about mental health. I want to ask you, what was the mental health of your students like before the pandemic? How did the pandemic impact that? And now, as we're kind of coming out of the pandemic and you're on the cusp of another school year here, what do you anticipate on this side of things going into the 22-23 school year?
Absolutely. Mental health has been a concern of ours even pre-pandemic. And we have the ability in Kokomo to hire social workers that are in the buildings and working with kids and working on small groups. I think the pandemic really served to accelerate some of those needs, and it brought it to the forefront. It brought some funding. We have great partnerships with local organizations. I have a school-based case manager with one of our local counseling organizations who's in my building every day, coordinating with the mental health psychiatrists and psychologists that work for that organization, able to facilitate some of those conversations and really provide what those kids need. There's always a growing need, but I certainly think that the pandemic brought that to the forefront of our world and showed it. I always had students who would struggle with depression or would struggle with self-harm. but it certainly has accelerated as we went through the pandemic and on our way out. I just had a conversation this morning with a student who really worked at home, did some virtual learning for 2 years through the pandemic, and is struggling with the idea of leaving home now and entering back into what I would call the real world, with others and leaving mom at home. And so those are real feelings, and we've got to be cognizant of that at school so that we are able to provide an experience for that student where they feel comfortable to learn. And understanding where they're coming from is the first part of that.
Coming out of the pandemic now, do you expect a shift back, or has it so changed the world? And I know we're not fully out of it anyway. What do you anticipate coming into this school year and this fall?
I'm hoping for normal. And I think, at least where we're at, I think everyone's ready for normal.
Yeah.
Whatever normal will be going forward. I don't think it's going to be a 2018 normal, but I think what normal will be going forward is what we're striving for. The very end of last year, it was our awards were coming back, our field trips were coming back, things that we have missed for 2 years are coming back. And I think, full swing, everything from, open house being all 100% back on and in person, all the way through, meet the teacher night and all those kind of things. We're back to 100% capacity, 100% of the events and things that we've always had, really becoming what we're going to build this year on and getting back to those.
That's good. Let me ask you, scholastically, academically, what kind of an impact do you think going through distance learning, having to socially distance, not always doing everything in person, what kind of an impact do you think that had on our youth going through this pandemic?
I know it had an impact, absolutely. I mean, we can look at statewide test scores, and there was an impact. Students who, both virtual and in person, saw declines from 19 to 20. At least our data locally, we saw some great gains last year and continue to build on those for this year. But a lot of it is finding a way to identify the areas that student in particular had missed or didn't fully grasp, and finding ways to build into the curriculum time for that to be addressed. So it's all about individualization at this point, and targeted intervention for what that student particularly needs. And I find a lot of students, as they come to us in 6th grade, they missed out on their elementary years. So a lot of that is the social and cognitive development of how to learn, how to sit in a class, how to comprehend at that level. So we utilize a lot of educational technology tools. There's a reading program that we use that's fantastic. There's a cognitive coaching tool called Brainware Learning that we use. And we really have found that ability to target individual students with those tools allows them to succeed.
That's wonderful. Tom, thank you so much. All the best as another school year is just around the corner. We hope it goes well at Maple Crest. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me on.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Restoring Hope with Crosswinds Counseling. I'm Curtis Smith, joined by our second guest now, Chris Daly, the Executive Director of IARCA. Chris, thanks for being with us tonight.
Absolutely, Curtis.
Crosswinds is a member of IARCA.
That's right.
But for those who don't know what IARCA is, tell us what it is.
So we're an association of child and family welfare agencies from throughout the state. We were founded over 75 years ago and have 100 members working in every county in Indiana, trying to keep families together when we can, trying to reunify them when they do need to be separated for the safety of children, and then when they can't be reunified, making sure that child is set up with a new family and integrated well into that family.
Big work, important work, and work that has really become more difficult, more challenging, and more volume to it over the last few years. What has this looked like across the state, especially during the pandemic?
Yeah, and it's really interesting, Curtis. So the CDC released a study a couple months ago looking at high school age youth, freshmen to seniors, over 7,500 youth. They found that 37% of them reported feeling some form of mental health issue. Around 55% of them reported that they had experienced some emotional abuse from their parents during the pandemic. 11% reported physical abuse.
Goodness.
And so we can just see what the need is right now, just around kind of adolescents' mental health and particularly those youth who've experienced trauma because they've been abused or neglected by their parents.
You work with the organizations. How are they doing? I assume they feel like at Crosswinds, we have seen an overwhelming need, and the burden of trying to meet that need is great. I assume it's the same thing across the state.
Yeah, Curtis, we're 2+ years into this. And so, so many folks were able to work from home in those early days of the pandemic, but your colleagues didn't get to.
Right.
Most of our member agencies weren't able to do that. They were kind of in the midst of it. So
Yep.
first they had to deal with all that fear around the pandemic when we didn't know anything. Remember, we used to leave our groceries on the front, doorstep for 2 weeks. So we've kind of gotten through that point, and now this workforce crisis is just slamming them. So what we're seeing is the actual uptick in need hasn't necessarily increased that much, but the number of people to provide the services has just been devastated.
Yeah.
And we're seeing wait lists from agencies who've never had wait lists before or reporting their wait lists are worse than they've been in recent memory. We're seeing residential agencies in particular. These are agencies who serve youth with high needs, where they're living in the facility and receiving therapy. They are having to cap their services based solely on being able to hire staff to provide those services.
So Chris, here's a simple little quick question. What's the answer? What's the solution? What do we do about this?
Well, fortunately, the state has, we're looking at about a $5 billion surplus. And we just need to really make sure that our state partners, of which we have a number of real huge champions, both in the governor's office and in the General Assembly, are just investing some money in stabilizing that workforce. They're hearing that from every single sector. What we can say is that our sector probably has been hit a little bit harder than most, and the ramifications of that problem are just kind of more dire. I think that's the immediate piece. The larger piece is we've just got to integrate mental health for youth, particularly from grade school all the way up through college, just into more of our programs. You guys are doing so much great work, both in the community and starting up all kinds of new programs. We just need more folks to be creating more opportunities to talk about mental health, and we just have to talk about it more openly.
In terms of legislators, I feel like I'm hearing and seeing the same thing you just alluded to. They're more aware of it. They know that they have to do something. They're trying to figure out exactly what to do. But I'm actually encouraged by the response, at least in Indiana, from our state legislators saying, tell us more, help us learn. Where can we step in? What can we do? How can we help? I feel that's been encouraging.
1,000%. And I think that what we saw in the most recent short legislative session was there's a real desire to shore up the workforce in child and family welfare. We didn't quite get over the finish line with that bill, but I think as we move into January's legislature, we're going to find exactly that support you're talking about. I think we've got some ideas for a really comprehensive grant program that's going to funnel some funds that folks can invest in their personnel. And I think once we do that, once we can stabilize, then I think we can talk about some of these larger issues that are out there.
Because they're not going to go away. Some of those numbers you were sharing are they're really hard to grasp. The abuse piece, students self-identifying as people who have mental health issues. And I think we can assume that anytime you see those reported numbers, there's probably an increase there that doesn't get reported.
No, I think that's exactly right. And again, we just haven't, as a society, haven't done a great job encouraging people to talk about their mental health issues. I do think that one of the outcomes of the pandemic is we've seen more people more willing publicly to talk about it, and I think that's true for our youth as well. But you're absolutely right, that even in an anonymous survey, there are youth who are unwilling to kind of express what they're dealing with or don't even have the terminology to express what they're dealing with.
Is another plus, though, what you just kind of hinted at, the stigma might be getting better. More people are willing to talk about it and have it out in the open and embrace the conversation. Are you truly seeing the stigma weakening and lessening?
Well, we're seeing the conversations.
Okay.
Whether that's going to have that effect of decreasing the stigma, we're just going to have to see. But I am optimistic that it is. And what we've got to do in our field is make sure it's not a moment in time. Right? Make sure that there aren't just some high profile folks talking about this and therefore it's all going to take care of itself. We've got to now figure out how to turn that moment into a much larger culture shift and really get to a point where folks are much more willing just to talk about what's going on with them and how we can all pitch in together to help.
Yeah. Chris Daly, the Executive Director of IARCA. Chris, thanks so much. This Such an important conversation. You guys do a monumentally important job. So thank you for that, first and foremost, but thanks for being here with us tonight as well.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. Each week here on Restoring Hope, we focus on the word hope in our Beacon of Hope segment. And tonight, Crosswinds executive Gordon Haynes is here to look at how we can find hope through parenting.
Hi, my name is Gordon. I'm a member of the Crosswinds executive team. I'm here today to talk about hope, and specifically, I'm going to talk about hope through parenting. My wife and I are a mentor couple in a young married's newly engaged class at our church. We're in the empty nest stage of life, and all these young couples seem to think that we have secret knowledge that will help them be successful. The only thing that gives us credibility is my youngest son and his wife are in the class, and they're truly awesome. I don't think we're wise as much as we are experienced. I'd love to tell you that when we raised our children, we had this grand plan that we were dedicated to and we followed it step by step. That is not the case. We kind of floated through life, doing the best we could. We were people of faith, but not people with the deep faith that I have today. The one thing that we did very well, that we were constant about, was we always told our kids there was nothing they could do that would make us not love them. There were behaviors we held them accountable for. There were things that they did that we didn't like, but we always loved them, and they never had to ask that question or wonder whether we loved them or not. God does that for us also. No matter what we do, God loves us. We fail, we're selfish, we sin, and yet God loves us. He's always there for us. God loves the sinner, but hates the sin. I find great comfort and hope in that. In fact, that's the foundation for my hope and my joy in life. The fact that God always loves me, He will always forgive me. If you don't have that faith, I'm going to encourage you to build that kind of relationship with God. Because in a world full of turmoil, He will be the constant. He will be the source for your joy and for your hope.
Welcome back to Restoring Hope with Crosswinds Counseling. In this week's Counseling Corner segment, John Lisey is here to talk about something we don't often talk about out loud, but has become such a massive concern in our society: sexual addiction.
Hi, I'm John Lisey. I'm a therapist at Crosswinds Counseling. And one of the things that I specialize in is sexual addiction. It's pretty common for clients come to me and want to talk about whether it's a pornography addiction or any kind of unwanted sexual behavior. Could be online sexting or chatting, affairs, basically anything sexually that they don't want in their life, but they're addicted and they're not able to get rid of it. And that has been around for, since the beginning of time, but certainly with the invention of the internet, it's become more accessible, it's more affordable than ever, often free, and anonymous. And that social barrier of going out and hiring a prostitute is no longer there with the internet. So we've seen, the statistics are pretty overwhelming, both inside and outside the church, as to how many, not just men, but certainly predominantly men, that have these sexual addictions. And they usually come and talk to me or another Crosswinds therapist, one, when they got caught, or secondly, when they've been trying to get free and they've been unable to. So one of the things that I find when people come and they finally open up is that they're just swimming in shame. They feel guilty, they feel terrible, whether they've gotten caught or whether they've just been unable to get free. That the shame is usually so thick that it prevents people from actually being curious about why it is that they're caught in a sexual addiction. Typically, most people just think, well, it's because something's wrong with me, or because I'm perverted, or they just have this kind of simplistic answer. And one of the things that I love to do as a therapist is to really stop and talk about why this got its hooks in you. and to just lay aside the shame for a while and just be curious about where this started. And that often will show what the real desire is that people are looking for, and then will point us to a way towards freedom. And it's really fulfilling for me as a therapist to see people that are, in their teens all the way into their 70s or 80s that have been addicted to unwanted sexual behavior for years to get free and find freedom and be released from all that guilt and shame. So I would love it if that's something that you're struggling with, or you know someone that is struggling, to come and talk to me, and we can work on this together to find freedom. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Great words on a topic that is often difficult and uncomfortable to discuss. Well, you just met one of our wonderful counselors, and maybe you need to schedule a visit with one of them. But maybe you are a counselor or a therapist, and you're looking for the right place to use your skill and compassion. Crosswinds Counseling is hiring. We need great men and women to join the organization and help us. If you're interested in pursuing a career at Crosswinds, please visit crosswindscounseling.org/careers. We have opportunities in Indianapolis and Fort Wayne, and soon Dayton, Ohio. Again, that website is crosswindscounseling.org/careers. As we wrap up tonight, thanks to all of you for joining us. It's great to have you with us every Thursday night. And a big thanks to Tesco, Shepherd Community Center, and Prime 47 downtown. And of course, thanks to our friends here at WHMB TV 40. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next Thursday night at 9:30. Stay safe, be blessed.